Aaron Dixon, in his book, My People Are Rising, talks about a very important time to remember, basically 1968 to 1978. Matter of fact, a time to remember up until just about 6 months ago was going to be the name of this book. After I read it for the first time, I thought it should be called The Last Panther Standing. I'm serious, and I'm going to tell you why, and then we're going to bring Aaron forward. Aaron, as was indicated, joined the Black Panther, was a founder of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party, which was the first organization or chapter formed and recognized by the national leadership outside the state of California. And in mid-April 1968, Bobby Seale came up here, who was the chairman of the Black Panthers, of course, at that time, and met with about 50 to 60 young African Americans. Many of us, about half of us, had already, just 2 weeks before that, gone to a West Coast Black Student Union conference at San Francisco State University, San Francisco State University was the first Black student union in the country, and it was very revolutionary. And by the time we went down there, many of the members of the Black Student Union there were also members of the San Francisco, Oakland, or Richmond chapters of the Black Panther Party. So they had gotten their chairman, Bobby Seale, to be the keynote speaker for all us Black students that had come. It was 30 of us from Seattle. No speaker had the kind of impact on our spirit, our souls, our emotions, and our desire to join the Black Power movement and be more meaningfully involved in it than the comments and rhetoric and teachings of Bobby Seale. Unfortunately, that was the same weekend that the first Panther had been murdered, little Bobby Seale, and we were all invited to go to his, little Bobby Hutton, I'm sorry. And we were all invited to Oakland to go to his funeral, and all of us did. And again, the Black Panthers had a tremendously deep, it's hard to express, profound impact on the young Black Power youth that were there from Seattle. And right then, somehow, Aaron and E.J. Brisker and some of the other brothers and sisters figured out a way to get a meeting with Bobby Seale. And he made a commitment then, after just meeting us once, to come up to Seattle and see whether or not he was going to allow a Black Panther Party outside of California to be started. So that was the beginning. Aaron stayed in the Black Panther Party, as all of y'all will find out from reading this book, until well into 1978. And at the height of the Black Panther parties, there were hundreds of chapters across the country and tens of thousands of members. By the time Aaron Dixon left the main headquarters of the Black Panther Party in Northern California, there were probably just a couple hundred. So this is one of the few Panthers that was there from the beginning to the end. And many of you Seattleites, one of the things that occurred in 1968 was that the white power structure in Seattle, Washington was aghast. They just couldn't believe that their Negroes would become involved in the Black Power movement. And Aaron talks about the metamorphosis of or changes in the Black community. And the most profound one that he talks about, and I had not remembered it until he mentions it in this book, was the visit of Stokely Carmichael in April of 1967, who spoke at Garfield High School to 2,000 Black people, most of whom, when we went in there, if you'd have asked us what we were, we would have said Negroes. 2 hours and 9 minutes later, this is the truth. And Aaron talks about all the blacks at Garfield came out of that Garfield Gymnasium saying, we are black and proud and we want black power. That's the profound impact that that speech has. But the conditions in Seattle is what made that ready change occur so rapidly. In Seattle, Washington in 1968, 50% of the black people in this community were living at or below the poverty level. 88% of us were forced to all live in the central area of Seattle because of housing discrimination. Those of us that didn't live in the central area lived in the housing projects, High Point, Yesler Terrace, Rainier Vista, and one more, Rainier, Holly Park. It's called New Holly now. So all the black students went to 14 or 15 schools in the central area where the scores on standardized tests were poorer than anywhere else in the city, and we're not allowed to teach black history. We had not had one black staffer hired to be an administrator in any school district, any high school in Seattle by 1968. But that changed with the creation of the Black Student Union that started at the University of Washington, where Aaron and I and 12 other folks, it was about 14 people. Miss Day is here. She was one of the original founders. Gary Owens came that year or the next, is also in the audience. And the Black Student Union at the University of Washington, it was the entity that organized the trip to the Black Student Union Conference in March that led to the founding of the Black Panther Party. The first meeting was held at Aaron Dixon's house. Bobby Seals chose Aaron to be the leader, not because we were meeting at his house, but just within a couple hours, he was able to sense that this guy was serious. He was disciplined. He didn't talk a lot. Matter of fact, Aaron felt kind of uncomfortable being a public speaker in the early days of the Black Panthers. When he could, he'd ask his brother, and I don't know if his brother's here, Elmer. Elmer just came in. He would ask Elmer to do the speaking, and Elmer just came in. He's probably coming from speaking and wooing thousands of people somewhere around our country because he's a nationally known diversity speaker. But Aaron was the thinker and the practitioner for the Black Panther Party here in Seattle. He's the one that led the effort to come up with concrete strategies to serve the people. He was the one that helped us start the first food banks anywhere in the Pacific Northwest. He was the one that said, let's get together and figure out how we can provide direct medical services to the poor children in the center, and he was the one that went out and got the doctors and nurses to volunteer. When people start saying we're tired of the rats and roaches, he was the one that said, let's set up an extermination program. Forget that we don't have the money, we'll get the tools together, and he figured out a way for us to get it. So without further ado, I hope I've given you a sense of the man and the personality and the truly revolutionary person from our community that wrote this outstanding book, My People Are Rising. Here is Aaron Dixon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Larry, and thank you for everybody coming out, and thanks for all the people that have supported the Black Panther Party and have supported myself over the years. But the first thing that I want to do, because Larry, I appreciate it, but he was laying a little bit too much on me, and it wasn't me. And Bobby Seale didn't appoint me. He asked who's going to be the captain, and everybody pointed at me. I don't know why, but they did. And it was my brother, Elmer, and Anthony Ware, and myself that approached Bobby Seale and asked for the Black Panther Party chapter up here. But as soon as we opened our office up, within the first couple of months, we had over 300 applications. And a lot of those people who did join the Black Panther Party were very young. I'm talking about 14, 15, and 16 years old. And you see that picture of the Panthers in Olympia. Elmer was the oldest one in that group. He was 18. Everybody else was 16 at 17. So could you imagine young people today at that age, 16 and 17, taking the powerful stand that members of the Black Panther Party did? And the first thing that I want to do is I want to ask all the Black Panther Party members that are here, I want them to stand, because these are the heroes. These are the ones who did the work, who went out and did the things that they had to do. These are the ones who sacrificed their lives. And I try to ask as many of the comrades to be here as possible, because I want them to get the recognition, because the leaders always get the recognition, and the real people who did the real work, the rank and file, often are overlooked. So can all the comrades please stand up? It wasn't easy, trying to write this book in the midst of trying to raise a family. And not only that, but I was raising a lot of other people's kids, because our house was full of other neighborhood kids all the time. I want to thank my family for helping me and supporting me through that. I want to thank all the people that I used to have to run from every time I saw them, because I know they were going to ask me that question. People like Gary Owens and Larry Gossett and Billy X, because if I see them coming, they're going to ask me, did you finish your book yet? Did you finish your book yet? And yes, I finally finished it. Okay? You don't have to ask that question anymore. But there are many other people. I can't think of everybody right now, but there are a lot of people. But this book was really, really important to me. It was just speaking to me all the time. This was something I had to write, because it was such a powerful time. It was such a magnificent time. It was probably one of the most exciting, probably one of the most dynamic times in modern American history for not just America, but particularly for Black Americans. And Bobby Seale says that the Black Panther Party was an accident, but it was not an accident. All the pieces had come together. Because my generation, we were a generation that was very much connected to history. I lived in the house with my great-great-grandmother in Chicago for a small period of time, and she was born in 1867. And we heard her stories, and we listened to her stories. We listened to the stories of my grandparents on both sides, my mother's parents and my father's parents. We listened to the stories of our parents. And we knew where we came from. We knew the struggles of our people. We knew the racism and the things that they had to fight and the things that they had to contend with. So we were part of the oral tradition. The oral tradition doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, but we were still part of that oral tradition. And that oral tradition is when the elders, and all of them, the aunts and uncles and everybody, every chance they had, they would tell the children. They would tell the children about what they had went through. Yeah. They would tell the children about the adversities and the accomplishments. And they were constantly doing this, and they did this for a reason. And so, growing up in that type of environment, that really prepared my generation, to be ready when 1967 and 1968 came about. And then, you had the Vietnam War that was taking place. You had many of the countries in Africa were fighting for their freedom and overthrowing their colonial rulers. In South America, you had the same thing. You had Che Guevara and Fidel Castro that had recently marched on Havana and taking control of Havana for the people. And so all of these things were fresh in our mind. Revolution was the word of the day, because revolution was taking place all over the world. Every major country in the world at that time, young people were rising up and they were rising up, and they were seizing control, and they were saying that they wanted a better world. They wanted to create a better world, and that's really what the Black Panther Party was really about. But the Black Panther Party was a phenomenal organization. There was many great leaders of the Black Panther Party, and I know some of them are mainline now because of things, but each one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party was special. You know, they had something very unique and very special to offer the movement. Eldridge, Huey, Bobby, Emory Douglas. The word I really want to use is genius. Each last one of them had a particular genius to them. And all the young people that came about. Now, what caused me to join the Black Panther Party was I was sitting in the King County Jail with Larry Gossett and Carl Miller. And we had just been arrested for the sit-in at Franklin High School. And later on that evening, Walter Cronkite comes on the radio, and he announces that Martin Luther King had been assassinated. Well, this was devastating news for us, devastating because Martin Luther King was a true champion of the people. He was a true lover. He was a man of love. He was a man of peace. And I had marched with Martin Luther King when I was very young. I think I was about 12 or 13 years old. But also we were really angry because we were locked up in jail and we could not be out on the streets protesting and letting our rage out at the murder of a very peaceful and a very loving man. But I remember late that night going back to my cell, and I remember lying there, and I remember saying that, and I had participated in marches and demonstrations and all of those things, but I remember saying to myself that they killed a man of peace. So now we have to do something else. We have to look for sterner stuff. We have to protect ourselves, and we have to protect our people. And I decided right then and right there that the picket sign that I once carried was going to be replaced by a gun. And I didn't realize that all across the country, young people were saying the same thing, all across the country. I mean, Black, Latino, Asian, Native American, and white youth were saying the same thing all across the country. Because you got to remember, it just wasn't the Black Panther Party that the struggles of the 60s was about, but there were a whole host of organizations. There was the Brown Berets, which was a Latino organization. There was the Black Berets, which was also a Latino revolutionary organization. There was the Red Guard, made of Chinese and Japanese. There were AIM, the American Indian Movement. There was SDS, and later the Weathermen. There was the Young Patriot Party, which was made up of poor whites from the Appalachians. And so, you know, we all coalesced and we all came together to really change America and really make America a place for everybody. But we knew it was going to be a sacrifice. We knew it was going to be a sacrifice, and we knew that blood was going to be shed, and we were willing to shed our blood at any cost. But the Black Panther Party had many, many accomplishments, many accomplishments. Of course, that first year, you know, in '68, we did carry guns. We carried guns up and down the street. First of all, it was legal to do so, and we wanted to let the community know that they had a right to protect themselves, and we wanted to let the police know that we were going to protect the community from now on because they weren't doing a very good job of it. So we were going to step in, and we were going to do it. You know, by 1969, we realized we had to do other things and help our community, that we were really separating ourselves from the community by our uniforms and the weapons that we were carrying. And the beautiful thing about the Black Panther Party, now when Bobby Seale first came to Seattle, he said, he told us there were 25 young people there. He said that in order to join the Black Panther Party, you had to have 2 weapons and 2,000 rounds of ammunition. He also told us that you had to read 2 hours a day, and you had to have political education class once a week. And he gave us a book list of 25 books and told us that we had to start reading those books and we had to study. And that's what we did. We studied and we practiced. So the Black Panther Party was always changing. We never were the same organization that we were 2 years prior. We were always changing because we understood that nothing stood outside of change and that we could not remain stagnant, that in order for us to be successful, we had to constantly change and adapt ourselves to the situation. So in 1969, when the Vietnam War had begun to take a lot of the resources from home, and a lot of people were laid off from Boeing, and a lot of people were poor, a lot of kids were going to school hungry. We had to create some programs. First of all, we knew we had to win the people over, and we weren't going to win them over necessarily by carrying our guns up and down the street. That we had to really serve them. We had to really provide things for them that they needed that weren't being provided. So one of the first programs that we did initiate was the Free Breakfast for School Children program. And we initiated that all across the country. And our orders came from central headquarters, and they told us, okay, we want you guys to start a Free Breakfast for School Children program. Now that didn't go over for some of the comrades, because a lot of people joined the party for a lot of different reasons. And some joined, they thought they were just going to be, in combat with the police all the time, but in reality, that was not reality. And so we had to start this breakfast program. So we opened 5 breakfast program locations. My brother Elmer, he was coordinating the breakfast program at that time. And so we opened up a breakfast program in every major housing project in the city of Seattle. And what the breakfast program basically was, you had little kids going to school hungry every day. And we said, how can little Johnny learn that 5 oranges and 4 oranges are 9 oranges? He hasn't even had an orange. So we went to community centers, we went to churches that were near elementary schools, and this was one of the first, Coleman Elementary School was one of the first breakfast programs that we opened. Ike Akita, who ran Atlantic Street Center, he was one of the first persons that opened the doors to the concept of the breakfast program. A lot of the black churches would not let us use the churches, but we're thankful that Ike Akita opened the doors for us at Atlantic Street Center, and we launched the first breakfast program. And Panthers would get up at 6 in the morning. They would go down to the community centers, wherever they were, and we would prepare breakfast, and the kids would come in and eat breakfast. And, Elmer would be out during the day collecting donations, going to Gay's Bakery and wherever we can get money and get food for the breakfast programs. Then one of the beautiful things that happened with the breakfast program, and I just met somebody tonight who told me that her mother worked in the breakfast program in Holly Park. But a unique thing happened is a lot of the welfare mothers started coming down to the breakfast program and asked what they could do to help. And so pretty soon they took over the breakfast program. All we had to do was make sure the food was there. And they prepared it, and they cleaned up, and they sent the kids on the way. And what this did was this empowered a lot of those mothers. It empowered them to take action in their community and empowered them to take action in their own lives and work towards achieving a lot of the goals that they had neglected. Shortly after we started the breakfast program, we started another program called the free medical clinic. This was the first free medical clinic in the Northwest, and we opened up the Sidney Miller Free Medical Clinic. There was a doctor named John Green who was a neurosurgeon at the University of Washington. And he just showed up at our office and said, I'm going to be you guys' doctor. And one of the first things that he had to deal with was the comrade that shot himself in the foot. That was one of the first things that Dr. John Green dealt with. But when we got the order to open up a medical clinic, we charged full steam ahead with developing this concept of the medical clinic. And we got doctors to volunteer their time, we got nurses to volunteer their time, we got community people to volunteer their time. Dr. John Green would let us back up his van. We'd take his van down to the University of Washington Hospital, and he told us, you guys wait here, and he would go in there and do whatever he was doing, and we start loading up. So it was a very short time before we had our medical clinic open. Like I said, it was the first community medical clinic in the Northwest, because at that time there were no small community clinics. They didn't exist. And so we laid the foundation for community clinics. That's why we have community clinics today, is because of what the Black Panther Party did. But we went on to start many programs. We had the free legal aid program, which we had lawyers come down to our community center twice a day, twice a week, to volunteer their time. For people who could not afford to see an attorney, they could come to our community center and they could meet with an attorney, and the attorney would give them advice or representation if they needed that. And then we started the first food bank. It was the Black Panther Party that started the first food bank. We started giving out bags of groceries out of our office once a week, every Wednesday. We gave out bags of groceries. Then we started what was called the Liberation School. They did not have summer programs for working parents at that time. So we started what was called the Liberation School, and we started it at Rainier Vista. And parents could drop their kids off to the Liberation School during the summer, and we provided breakfast, we provided lunch, we took them on field trips, and we educated them, and we did a lot of things with the kids, and a lot of young people grew up in that Liberation School. But we went on to start so many programs. It would take me a long time to really talk about all those programs, but being in the Black Panther Party was a lot of work. You know, we got up at 6 in the morning after being on guard duty. Everybody had to be on guard duty for 2 hours because the police and the FBI were trying to kill us. They were trying to annihilate us. And so we had to fortify our offices. We had to take weapons training. We had to make sure everybody knew how to use a weapon. Everybody had to do security 2 hours a night from 10 to 12, 12 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 6. 6 o'clock, everybody had to get up and get ready and go out to the breakfast program. They went out to the breakfast program and served the kids. They came back, they cleaned themselves up, and they had to go out in the field and sell Black Panther newspapers, because the Black Panther newspaper was so important to us. And the Black Panther Party newspaper was one of the most beautiful and one of the most powerful newspapers in the world. We had a circulation of 350,000 newspapers, Black Panther Party newspapers worldwide. And we understood that the paper was the voice of the party, and it also was the voice of the people. So everybody had to go out and sell 100 Black Panther newspapers every day, except for Sunday. So when people came, and then the people who coordinated the programs, the breakfast program, the Liberation School, the free busing, the prison program, they would have to take time off and work on their programs, make sure they had everything they needed for their programs. And then we would come, the people would come in from the field, and dinner would be prepared, and then we'd have political education class or weapons class, and then, we would have a little bit of time for some recreation, and then, people went to bed, and then there were people who had to do security. But we did not realize that J. Edgar Hoover, Attorney General John Mitchell, and Richard Nixon had created a plan to destroy the Black Panther Party called COINTELPRO. But we did not realize that they had set 1969 as the period that they would have the Black Panther Party wiped out. We did not know that. We did not know that they were going to try to wipe us out by 1969. One day in September, we got a call from a black gentleman who worked for the Justice Department. He wanted to meet with Elmer and I. And we said, no, we don't want to meet with anybody from the Justice Department. But he kept calling back, and he called back, and he said it's a matter of life and death. So we decided that we had to go meet him. So Elmer and I went down, And we met him on the corner of where the federal building was. And he told us that the FBI had plans to raid our office and to kill us. And so with that information, we began to fortify our office. But we didn't know that there was a memo sent out by J. Edgar Hoover that said that he wanted 3 chapters destroyed. He wanted Chicago, he wanted LA, and he wanted Seattle chapters destroyed. We did not know that. And so with that memo, on the morning of December 4th, probably one of the saddest days for me in the Black Panther Party, there was a young man named Fred Hampton. If you guys don't know who Fred Hampton is, please, when you get home, get on the computer and look up Fred Hampton. Fred Hampton, along with Bobby Rush, was the founder of the Chicago chapter of the Black Panther Party. He was only 19 years old. He was the same age as I was. And one of the first things that Fred Hampton did was he went down to the Black Gangster Disciples and the Blackstone Rangers and told them that they were going to have to stop fighting each other. See, we're from Chicago, so we knew about the Blackstone Rangers and the Black Gangster Disciples and how those gangs were. So Fred told them, you have to stop fighting each other. And as a result, now the FBI did not want this alliance to take place, so they did everything they could to make sure it didn't. So the Blackstone Rangers decided to join the Black Panther Party. They changed their name to the Black Pea Stone Nation and began to work with the Black Panther Party. But Jeff Fort, who was head of the Gangster Disciples, opted out in this coalition. The next thing that Fred Hampton did was he went down to the Latino community, the Puerto Rican community, where Cha-Cha Jimenez and a gang called the Young Lords were active. He went down and met with them. He went down, and then he went down and met with, in the poor white community of Chicago, and he met with the poor whites there, and with a brother named Slim, and formed a coalition, the Rainbow Coalition. This was the first Rainbow Coalition. It was Fred Hampton, not Jesse Jackson, that started the Rainbow Coalition, okay? So with the forming of the Rainbow Coalition, this meant that Mayor Daley, who had been the mayor of Chicago since the 30s, would be challenged. He would be challenged. And he did not want this. And so Fred Hampton had a target on his head. Fred Hampton was fastly a rising star on the revolutionary world of America. He was getting speaking engagements in Europe and in Canada. He was going to be appointed to the Central Committee. He was going to be the first non-California to be appointed to the Central Committee of the Black Panther Party. And I had a chance to speak on the platform with Fred Hampton at the University of Chicago in the winter of 1968. And anybody who met Fred Hampton, when you met him, you walked away and you said, this is a very special young man. And when he spoke like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, all rolled into one. He was a tireless. This man was so dedicated to what he was doing that his comrades in Chicago had to tie him down in a chair, tie him down so he could get some rest. You know, he would have all the Panthers in Chicago. He would have them up at 6 in the morning. He would have them at the park. He would have them exercising and doing calisthenics. And he would be doing the call and response. He would say, I am a revolutionary. And the comrades would say back, I am a revolutionary. He said, I will die for the people. And the comrades would say back, I will die for the people. Fred Hampton was an amazing person. But on the morning of December 4th, the ATF and the Chicago Police Department burst into Fred's home and murdered him. What had happened was Fred had been up meeting with his staff till about 2 in the morning, and you know, this is what we did. We worked and we met. And when it was time to go to sleep, we went to sleep wherever we were. We didn't need a bed, we didn't need pajamas, we didn't need none of those things. We just went to sleep on a table, chairs, floor, wherever. So Fred met with his staff. Now his security person was an FBI informant. And he had given the layout to Fred Hampton's pad to the ATF. He had also put some Sycanol in Fred's drink, which is a derivative that's in Red Devils that makes you go to sleep and makes you real laid back. And so there was a knock on the door at 4 in the morning, and Mark Clark, 19-year-old captain of Peoria, Illinois, went to the door with a shotgun because he was on security. He said, "Who is it?" A shot rang out, and it killed Mark Clark instantly. Simultaneously, the ATF, Chicago police, burst through the rear doors with Thompson submachine guns. They burst through the front door. They went in the living room. They got all the Panthers that were asleep. They lined them against the wall, machine gunned them. They went into Fred Hampton's room. His wife, who was 6 months pregnant, shook him, tried to wake him. Fred, wake up. But he had been drugged, and he could not wake up. And the police lowered their guns and shot him while he was asleep. Shot him while he was asleep. That's how much afraid they were of this young man, Fred Hampton, that they killed him while in his sleep. And when June Hilliard, the assistant chief of staff, called me that morning and told me that Fred Hampton died, it was one of the most heaviest feelings that I would ever feel in the Black Panther Party. I had already been to Bunchy Carter's funeral. I had already been to a whole bunch of funerals. There had already been a lot of deaths in the Black Panther Party, but Fred Hampton's was the heaviest because I knew who he was, and I knew that if he had lived, he would have been a great contributor to humankind. 2 days later, the ATF go to L.A. Now, the L.A. Panthers were very military-minded. They had the most Vietnam vets, and because of the ferociousness of the L.A. Police Department, the L.A. Panthers were some of the baddest niggas in America, okay? So they knew that a raid was coming. So they had built a bunker inside their office. And they took all the chairs and all the desks and put them on each side of the door. So that they knew that the SWAT team, now the SWAT team came about because of the Black Panther Party. They knew that when the SWAT team came in, they're going to bust through the door, they're going to go to the left, they're going to go to the right. Well, on this occasion, they came and they cordoned the whole area off for almost a mile. They kicked people out of their homes, and they had an anti-tank had a tank. They had a tank out there. They had helicopters, and they began an assault on Central Avenue office of the Black Panther Party of Los Angeles. And they burst through the door. And they couldn't go right, and they couldn't go left, and the Panthers opened up and blew them right out the door. And they had a shootout that lasted for over 8 hours. And when the sunlight was up and all the people came out on the streets, the Panthers, many of them were wounded. They put up the white flag and surrendered because they know that this was time for them to surrender. And they were all arrested and charged with attempted murder. 2 days later, the ATF come to Seattle, and they go to Mayor Wes Oman, and they tell Wes Oman that Panthers have automatic weapons in there. And the mayor tells them, well, my informant tells me that they don't have any automatic weapons. See, Mayor Wes Oman, Seattle being the small community as it was, and everybody knew who we were, and we were doing so much in the community. Everybody knew who the Black Panther Party was. They knew our names, and he knew that he did not want what happened in Chicago or what happened in L.A. to be on his hands. He had a conscience, and he was not going to let that happen. And he told the ATF, I'm not going to allow you to go up there and kill them. And so as a result, the ATF had to abort that plan because we know that they wanted to come in and kill us. Now, we had heavily fortified our office. We had double sandbags all the way up to the ceiling. We had steel on the doors, and we had put steel in between plywood, and we had gas masks. Elmer and I got our financial aid checks, our last financial aid checks from the University of Washington, about $1,400. And all of our money went on guns and gas masks and bulletproof vests. So there's many stories that I could tell, but you have to read the book. But even my book doesn't really capture the tremendous amount of stories that exist in the Black Panther Party, and all of the work and the sacrifices that members of the Black Panther Party did. And you know, I'm glad that I'm survived, and I'm just really, really happy to see so many comrades here, you know, because, you know, we had a love for each other. We had a true love for each other, and I write in the book that Black Panther Party had replaced my family. They had become my family. You know, they had become my new family. And, you know, we were willing to die for one another, and we really loved one another. We truly loved each other, and we were willing to do anything that we could do for one another. And that was one of the most beautiful parts of being in the Black Panther Party. So I think I'm going to end, but there's one person that I forgot to thank, and that is Deborah Green, the wife of Dr. John Green. Because, you want to stand, Deborah, for a minute, if you don't mind? Now, Deborah helped me get my manuscript completed. She did the first editing of my manuscript, and she helped me get it into a finished product, even though I pretty much threw it in the garbage can and had to rewrite it over again. But she helped me get there, and I'm really thankful for her for helping me do that. So I think we need to have some time for question and answer periods. So I want to thank again everybody for coming out, and we're going to open it up for question and answers. Yes. 20th and Spruce. Yeah. Okay. Now he's talking about the mural that's on 20th and Spruce. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. But that's where our community center was. We opened that community center in September of 1969. And that's the place where we had our fortification. That's where we opened up the first free medical clinic. That's where we started our food bank. That's where we started our legal aid program and many, many other programs. And when we did finally decide to move out of there, you know, they had to tear it down because it was, I'm sorry, it was a fort. It was a fort, but 20th and Spruce, yes, that's it.
Who are the artists?
Can you give us a thumbnail sketch of the history of Carolyn Downs? A lot of people know about Carolyn Downs.
Okay, so you know, when we first started the clinic, we named it after Sidney Miller. Sidney Miller was a Black Panther Party member from Chicago who was killed in a very tragic incident. And we named the clinic after Sidney Miller. Later on, around 1974, there was a young lady that joined the Black Panther Party. Her name was Carolyn Downs, and she dedicated herself to working in the clinic. And unfortunately, she passed away of cancer, and so we named the clinic Carolyn Downs Clinic, and we created the nonprofit program called Sidney Miller Nonprofit Organization. And the clinic is still open today, right there on Yesler, Carolyn Downs. There's one of two Black Panther clinics that are still open to this very day.
What's the other one?
In Portland, Oregon, the clinic is still open. Yes.
Thank you, sir. When I was much younger, I read a history of the underground press in America with regard to the frequency of the publications, weekly and monthly, bi-monthly. They quoted, not by name, but they quoted a Panther working very hurriedly on the Black Panther House order, who said, "It's a weekly, man, it's just that some weeks are longer than others." And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the paper and what it meant to the party. And I was wondering, did the ups and downs of the paper coincide with the ups and downs of the party, or was it sometimes a discorrelation?
Now, there was only one time, one small period when the paper did not come out. That's when Eldridge Cleaver, the Minister of Information, was locked away because he was the force behind the newspaper at that time. And when he was arrested, the paper lay dormant for a month or two. But after that, the paper came out on time every week. And when the paper first started, Panthers from all across the country would send in articles, would send in pictures, to central headquarters. And central headquarters would do the layout of the newspaper. Comrades who worked on the newspaper, they stayed up for 2 or 3 nights doing the layout of the newspaper. And then once the paper was laid out, they would take it to the printers, and it would be printed, and the paper would be delivered to a distribution center in San Francisco. And every Wednesday night, Panthers would come from all over the Bay Area, and they would work on boxing the newspapers and rolling up the individual pieces of newspapers and shipping those newspapers all over the world. And that was a tradition. That became a tradition, a Black Panther Party tradition. We would be there from 8 in the evening till 5 in the morning getting the papers prepared. Now, the FBI did a lot of things to try to stop the paper from coming out. You know, sometimes Panthers from different cities would go to pick the newspaper up, and the papers would be burned, they would be soaking wet, they would disappear, they wouldn't be there. So there was a lot of tactics they were doing that showed you how valuable the paper was, that they were trying all kinds of things to keep this paper from coming out. They would arrest Panthers while they were out selling the newspaper. So what the Black Panther Party did, see, the Black Panther Party was, you know, we were dialectical thinkers. We were always thinking ahead. And so to combat what the FBI was doing, we decided that instead of shipping the papers from San Francisco, we would have a Panther take the prints and fly to Chicago and fly to New York, and we would have them printed there. And from there, they would be distributed where they needed to be distributed. You know, the party the newspaper went through a lot of different cycles. When we went through the centralization and all the chapters and branches moved to Oakland, the newspaper became a very refined newspaper, and David Du Bois was chosen by Huey to be the editor of the Black Panther newspaper. And all the best photographers, all the best writers came to Oakland, to central headquarters, and they worked on the newspaper. And so if you ever get a chance to look at like a paper from 1968 and a paper in 1974, you will see the difference and how the paper evolved. It was always an evolving process. There's a story that Bobby Seale tells me that in South Africa, when the ANC fighters came in from the bush, they would come into their office, and there would be a box of liquor in one corner and a box of Black Panther papers in the other. They went to the Black Panther papers because they knew they were getting the righteous information from the Black Panther newspapers. Yes.
This year, 2012, is a very scary year. We're seeing an upsurge in lynching in America, particularly lynching of black people. The data at U.S. Human Rights Network is approximately every 36 hours, a black person is getting lynched in this country. We've had a major city, Philadelphia, announced this year it's going to be the first major city to have no public education whatsoever. We have an epic record of land loss, working class land loss, starting first and foremost with African American land loss in the form of bank theft through foreclosure. So the question is, what does your book and what do you propose to do today in the program?
Well, you know, I'm not a politician anymore, and I can't stand up here and say what I propose to do because I really don't know. I really don't know. The only thing that I felt that I needed to do was write this book, and I wrote this book for the young people and the generation that's coming up. I wrote this book to inspire them because now it's up to them. It's up to them to figure out what needs to be done and how it's going to be done. And I think that there's a lot of life left in the young people here, members of the Black Panther Party as well, and we will always be there to lend our wisdom and our knowledge and our assistance to the young people. Yes, I'm going to get to you. Yes.
So, have you ever been wounded, or I see your arm, your left arm looks like there's something wrong with it? Have you ever been wounded?
Okay, that's LJ. That's LJ. He was one of the young men that I worked with at Sharpless High School. I'm so glad to see him. A lot of the young people that I've worked with are here today, but thanks, LJ, for asking that. And, you know, there were a couple of attempts on my life. There was in regards to his question, I had bought a shotgun in Oakland, California. It was a Riot 18 with a bayonet attachment. And one day, Big Malcolm Williams, who was also a member of the Black Panther Party, we decided that we needed to go out and make sure all the weapons were working, in working order. So we loaded all the weapons up in the step van, and we headed out to the Green River to try to find a nice spot. We smoked some hash on the way. We got out to the Green River and we unloaded the weapons and we started, shooting them. We started test firing every weapon. And the last weapon that we test fired was my shotgun, the Riot 18. And Malcolm said, "Man, that's yours. You go ahead and fire." So I put it up to my shoulder, but there was a voice that whispered in my ear that said, "Don't fire from your shoulder." I looked at my watch. I had this young prostitute, and we did a lot to help the prostitutes in the community. Whenever Elmer and I would see the prostitutes down on Yesler, and we saw young girls that we knew that went to school, we would get them and we would send them home. There's a whole chapter in there in the book that talks about our relationship with the pimps, which wasn't cordial, and how we worked to get these girls off the streets. But there was a young lady who she took her pimp's watch. It was a gold watch with jade in it, and she gave it to me. And I remember looking at that watch before I fired the shotgun. And so I put it down to my hip, and I pulled the trigger. And when I pulled the trigger, the firing pin, as soon as the firing pin hit the primer, the shotgun exploded, and my arm was almost blown off. And we were able, we were able to get to the hospital, and the doctor said, had I not smoked the hash, that I would have died because I would have lost a lot of blood. But the significance of this is we took the shotgun shells, Elmer and my father took the shotgun shells down and had them tested. And what they found out was the gunpowder had been taken out and high explosive had been put in the place of the gunpowder. And I had a bandolier of shotgun shells. Everybody knew that that was my personal bandolier. Somebody got hold of it, I don't know who. And that's what happened. That's how my arm got almost destroyed. And they wanted to amputate it. They wanted to amputate it. My mother said no. My mother said, "You are not going to amputate his arm." Thank you, Mom. Next question.
Right. The last chance I had to hear you speak was on a panel right here, and I came late, so I didn't get the chance to hear what I hear tonight about how the massacre in Chicago for the Black Panther Party. I did a little research on that. That's the reason why I posed that question. And my question was, I don't know if you remember it or not, was the Black Panther Party here in Seattle the same Black Panther Party that was connected to the Black Panther Party that was in Illinois and the massacre and thing? Because I did research and I heard of the connection they had with the Gangster Disciples, the street organization. And you had a chance to speak on that, and you cleared the water a little bit. You say, wait a minute, because I was an organization member at that time. A lot of us was organization members, but we put an end to organization, street life, meaning organization, when we became a legal Black Panther Party members. So gang members was absolute. It wasn't until they crushed the Black Panther Party is when the members pull their flags back out and say, man, we're going back to the street.
Yeah.
The drug of choice at that time, you say, was cocaine. I say right now, and hopefully your book would agree with this, I say it's a new day. Let's try it again. These young people that's killing themselves on the street would be glad to put their flags away if you organize like the Black Panther Party, putting money in their pockets. They'll be glad to put pistols down the dope sack down and do something positive.
I would hope so, but you bring up a interesting point, is that during the whole era of the Black Panther Party, gang warfare in America came to a standstill. And he's right, it wasn't until 1980s, when the Black Panther Party was no longer around, that you saw the emergence of the gangs again. Because we would not have allowed that. We would not have allowed it. We would not have allowed crack cocaine to come into our community. And you know, that's really a good question, because cocaine was a casual drug in the 70s, and everybody snorted cocaine. I snorted cocaine with congressmen and Hollywood directors, so everybody was doing it. But when I went to Oakland in 1972, Oakland was flooded with cocaine. And we always thought the mafia was bringing the cocaine in, but it wasn't until I read Gary Webb's book, Dark Alliance, that it was the Nicaraguan drug dealers who were bringing cocaine into, it wasn't the Contras yet, but these were the Nicaraguan drug dealers in the early 70s that were bringing cocaine into California, and particularly Northern California. And those drugs found its way into Oakland. And it did affect the leadership, namely Huey P. Newton. It did affect him and affect his judgment. Now, but there were other things that were happening with Huey, and you could read the book. But also what happened was in New York, in the Soho community, where the white left was located, there was a tremendous influx of heroin. And many of the leaders of the white left became addicted. So drugs, you know, these types of things have always been used to deaden the minds and deaden the nerves of the people. And I mean, if you haven't read the book Dark Alliance by Gary Webb, then you should read that book. My next book that I'm working on is called Journey to the Black Underground, and it's going to really touch on what happened in the 80s and the 90s.
If you could give your young self a piece of really important advice right now, what would you say to them?
I would say that if you're really going to undertake this type of work, that you really have to be willing to give up everything, because that's really what it takes. It takes dedication and it takes sacrifice.